も勝つ。何としてでも生きる。
Izuku went upon the happiest of childhoods. You see, what ended up happening is that Isashi, he wasn't all that, well, financially stable, you could say. He was trying to look after his family by taking up multiple jobs. He was only making ends meet though within these jobs that he had. He would come home and just be so exhausted. He would just go to sleep on the couch. He would usually just collapse on the couch as soon as he got home and took off his shoes. He would barely have any time to spend with Inko and Izuku. He wouldn't really give them much attention, but the two of them would be aware of the fact that it was because of the fact that he had such a busy schedule, just trying to provide for his family. They couldn't really fault him for that. But Izuku did have a strained relationship with his father over the years because of the little amount of attention he got, though. With all of the jobs that Sashi had, though, he was at least able to afford his family a decent apartment and put food on the table for them. That was something that Izuku could respect. Sashi could only afford to give Izuku the bare minimum amount of clothes, though. Izuku would have gotten teased by other kids for the fact he wore the same raggedy clothes every day to school, while every other kid, they would usually wear fresh clothes that their parents got for them. It would become even worse for Izuku as time went by because of the fact that when he turned 4 years old, he would find out that he was quirkless. The bullying, it would only increase from there, tenfold actually, more fuel to the fire for many of the students, especially one by the name of Bakugo Katsuki. Izuku's father, well, due to all of the jobs that he worked, it would actually build up quite a bit of stress. He would die from stress by the time Izuku was 8. Although he wasn't particularly close with his father, he did still care deeply for him because of, well, the fact that his father was the breadwinner of the household. He was the one that was really taking care of them. Izuku understood that much at the very least. He understood that he was a hard-working man who did everything that he could do to provide for his family, and he adored his father for that. So when Bakugo was making fun of Izuku for the loss of his father, it would have cut cord with Izuku. Most of the students would be silent hearing what Bakugo was saying about Izuku's father, mentioning the fact that Izuku's father probably died from embarrassment. Most of the students would be silent hearing this. A couple of them would even whisper about how it was a pretty messed up joke, but Bakugo wouldn't care. Izuku, he wasn't about to take this any longer. He would have balled up his fists, tightening them the more Bakugo mentioned his father. Bakugo, noticing the intense glare in Izuku's eyes, would actually laugh at him. He would question why Izuku was giving him that look. He would continue to berate Izuku, continuously mentioning the fact that his father only really died because of embarrassment, for having to raise a quirkless kid, and Izuku would just be sick of it. He would punch Bakugo in the nose with all the force he could produce at that moment. Bakugo would have had a bloody nose from the attack, and he would be angry at Izuku at the fact that he was injured by a quirkless nobody. In response, he would attack Izuku, leaving him with several burn marks, and Izuku would be on the floor. He would have been hurt even more, but a towering figure of a man would actually step in, breaking up the fight between the two. Well, not really much of a fight at this point. More so just Bakugo just making an example out of Izuku. Bakugo would just walk away after the towering figure broke up the fight between the two, and he would put his attention onto Izuku now. He would actually pick Izuku up and put him back up on his feet. Izuku would be scared at first though. He would be wondering what the man would do to him, but he would calm down when they mentioned how they saw Izuku's performance back there against the blonde kid. They didn't necessarily know Bakugo's name or anything, nor did they really know Izuku. All they were concerned about was the fact that this green-haired kid fought pretty pathetically. But he did commend him for at least managing to give that jerk a bloody nose beforehand. He would question why Izuku didn't use his quirk though. Oguru would find out though that Izuku, well, he had no quirk whatsoever. Although they didn't normally encourage violence within little kids of all people, it seemed like Izuku needed some form of self-defense training at the very least. Oguru would actually offer Izuku some lessons in being able to fight against quirked individuals. Izuku, hearing this, would actually jump to the opportunity. Oguru would actually give Izuku his number, and he would request for Izuku to have his mother call him by this number. That way the two of them could actually talk more about it, basically set up some arrangements for Izuku. Inko would actually hear Oguru's offer and find out that Izuku was getting bullied at school. She had always figured this was the case, but she had no hard, solid evidence up until now. Now that she was hearing it from another person, finally. And there was another issue though. Well, this issue being the fact that they were barely able to afford rent, considering Hisashi had died recently. So they couldn't really afford to sign up Izuku for anything related to martial arts or any special after school activities actually. And Inko needed to start working a couple of jobs as well in order to make up for their lost form of income. Basically, since Hisashi was the only one working at the time, now Inko had to actually I forgot the expression, basically having to pick up the work from now on if they didn't want to be kicked out onto the streets. That was Oguru. He would actually listen to what Inko was saying, and he would offer to do the lessons for free. Inko would be hesitant, but she would take up the offer anyways, if it meant that her son could be protected from these bullies at school. Then she would jump to any sort of opportunity like this. She just hoped for the best overall. From there, Izuku's life would begin to change dramatically. Oguru wouldn't be the easiest of mentors. He would actually push Izuku to his limits when it came onto his reflexes and speed during their training. He would have Izuku do different variations of push-ups and light sense of barbell curls. Well, for now anyways. Izuku only had his body, so he had to become as strong as possible, as fast as possible, as intelligent as possible if he wanted to compete with quirk users. Agoru would also teach Izuku how to throw a punch and take one too, because he mentioned that the one Izuku threw back then, Katsuki Bakugo, was definitely a newbie punch. That was a horrible punch after all, even for an 8-year-old. Izuku would begin to pack on some muscle during the years too. During all of this training, Izuku's confidence would increase. It would actually shoot through the roof, with Izuku feeling far more capable of himself here. The bullies would still be there, but Izuku would actually manage to fight back this time around. Most thought that Izuku was easy prey until they ended up getting into a fight with a boy, when realizing that Izuku would no longer back down from a fight, and he actually started to win some of these fights too. Most of the time these kids were unable to actually touch Izuku now. Izuku wouldn't have had any form of shame whenever he had to resort to underhanded tactics either. It was something that Agoru basically agreed to when it came on to fighting, saying that basically dirty tactics are essential in a fight. You basically need to get the edge in every single fight. It was only fair they use underhanded tactics when people fought with their quirks against quirkless people too. Heroes had to use underhanded tactics sometimes when it came on to dealing with villains, and Izuku wanted to be a hero, right? Forget all of this noble stuff about heroes. Nah. Heroes, they need to save people. No matter what, they need to save people regardless of the consequences or how it may affect their image if they were to use some sort of underhanded tactic. Underhanded tactics, that doesn't really exist. That's not a term that really exists in the world of heroes. Izuku would actually make his way up the totem pole for the strongest kids in school, until he was right below Bakugo. In terms of strength, he wasn't necessarily like the strongest kid ever. When it came on to strength enhancing quirks, yeah, they still had the edge over him, but well, Izuku could probably fight them off. He knew ways to take down several quirk users now. Izuku's personality would have shifted drastically at this point. Izuku enjoyed fighting and instilling his form of justice onto others. Kids would actually fear Izuku for his combat skills. Izuku would have a cold exterior outside of fighting though, after being mentored by Knuckle Duster for so long. Izuku would often fight people first, before asking questions. One day Izuku would be in the courtyard, fighting Bakugo. A large crowd would gather around the two. Both boys would have been around the age of 13 at this point in time. Bakugo would try to launch several explosions at Izuku, but the green-haired boy would be able to dodge most of these attacks in time. Izuku would try to get close in order to land a couple of blows onto Bakugo. When these punches did end up connecting, to Bakugo, it felt like they were literal bricks, or like literal stones, boulders, whatever you want to call it, any sort of hard material being thrown at you, really. That's how bad it felt for Bakugo. It felt like he was being knocked off of his game. Izuku's stamina would have been greater than Bakugo's own at this point in time. Izuku had much more of a goal than Bakugo. He had far more drive than Bakugo when it came on to being a hero. Bakugo was blessed with a quirk. Izuku wasn't, so Izuku had to train twice as hard as any other kid in his school. Not even twice, 4 times, 5 times, probably 10 times harder than the best kids out there. That's how much Izuku had to train. Izuku would wear out Bakugo and eventually also end up being the one to knock the blonde out as well. Izuku, well, he would be suspended for 2 weeks afterwards. Bakugo wouldn't have received anything more than just a detention. Overall, just a slap on the wrist for Bakugo. But this actually did something to Bakugo's psyche. He would be replaying the fight in his head for the next 2 weeks, wondering how a quirkless kid could beat him. It didn't make much sense in his head at all. Izuku, on the other hand, would have felt accomplished. The biggest bully throughout pretty much all of his life had basically been defeated at his hands. He was so proud of himself, but neither his mother or Sensei would be all that pleased about the news though. Aguru, he would actually berate Izuku for using his lessons to fight other school kids even when unprovoked. In his eyes, Izuku was becoming a bully himself. Inko would agree. Izuku would be grounded until further notice. As part of this punishment, he wasn't allowed to visit Aguru in order to train anymore. Izuku would try to plead this case with his mother, but Inko wasn't having it. She would actually refuse to hear any of Izuku's argument. Izuku would be forced to write an apology letter to Katsuki as well. Izuku, in the middle of the night, would be thinking of how to write the undeserving apology letter, but nothing would be coming to mind. He would need a breath of fresh air. So he decided to grab an oversized red jacket from out of his closet, and he would also take up a pair of black sweatpants before sneaking out the window. Of course, he would grab a pair of shades and a black mask too, just to hide his identity from his mother for right now. He would be aware of the fact he was still on punishment, but he just needed to clear his head. Izuku would be walking through the city until he walked past an alleyway. He would hear some guys talking. He'd turn his head slightly, only to see 2 more guys. Only to see 2 guys towering over a young woman, probably around her early 20s. The girl would be cowering in fear. She'd plead for the men to just let her go, but the guys, they weren't listening at all. Izuku would hear the lewd comments the men made about her and understand immediately what was about to happen. Izuku would quickly intervene by slamming into one of the 2 guys there. They would immediately fall to the ground, but Izuku would quickly pick himself up. He would actually stomp down on the man's head, leaving him unconscious. The other man would try to grab Izuku, but he would be too fast for this guy as well. He'd headbutt them in the stomach. They would have reeled over, but this wasn't the end of Izuku's onslaught. You see, Izuku had yet to reach puberty and get his growth spurt, so using his body's momentum was the best he had right now against opponents like this. Izuku would make sure to slam this guy into the wall, knocking him out as well. It was right after he had just headbutted him too. Izuku would turn to the woman, asking if she was alright. She would still be shaken, but she would thank Izuku for saving her. Izuku would fake a deeper voice in order to avoid being recognized from what he sounded like, although it was pretty obvious that he was faking the deeper voice to the woman. The woman looking at his stature would realize that he was on the younger side probably, but she had no idea that he was only 13 years old. Azuku would wait for the woman to leave before running back home. He would have felt exhilarated a little bit from this fight. Azuku would continue to do this for the next 2 weeks that he was suspended from school, and he would fight people who he would catch in the act or attempted act of wrongdoing. Azuku would be branding his own form of justice at this point. And Azuku wouldn't have realized it at first, but he was also making a name for himself throughout the streets. This name that was associated with him was, of course, Red Hood, for the red jacket that he wore, and the fact that he always had his hood over his head. Even when he went back to school, Azuku wouldn't stop with his pursuit of giving criminals what they needed. By the time Azuku had turned 14, he had basically become an infamous vigilante, known for being brutal in his fighting style. He was despised by most of the police, but there would be people who liked the vigilante. To them, he was making the streets safer. Azuku wouldn't realize that he was getting the attention of other vigilantes though. Some that would actually recognize Azuku's fighting style, although mixed with a more aggressive style to it. There was a bit more aggression to this fighting style. They could only assume that could have been because of the fact that he had a shorter stature and knuckle duster. As far as Azuku was concerned though, he needed to focus more on getting into UA. This is basically where I'm going to end it for right now. Kinda short, but it's whatever. The next part, if this does well, is probably gonna be much longer. And yeah, it is your boy King Ty Next signing out. You guys already know the deal. If you like the video, just like, maybe leave a comment. If you like my content in general and have been watching for a little while now, hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell if you are rocking with my content. So yeah, I am out. Peace.